It's a Friday edition, Orange and Blue today. Cecil Lammy, Andrew Mason talking about the plan for Sean Payton and Greg Penner, Mace. It sounds like they can be aggressive, but it sounds like they'll be maybe measured is the word out of Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit.
Yeah, aggressive, but I think learning some lessons from last year when they couldn't be as aggressive as maybe they would have hoped, or maybe Sean Payton particularly would have hoped. So they were forced to be very intentional with their free agent moves in 2024. And by and large, they worked out really well. And I think you can learn some lessons from that can apply to when you're at this moment, according to overthecap.com, looking at having $45.2 million of cap space before you make any moves.
Yeah, be smart with your money. You know what I mean? I don't think with Greg Penner running the show, and we both have a great appreciation for Greg and Kerry Walton Penner and the Walton Penner group overall and how they've run this team. But I kind of like the idea of working within a budget because of how much it worked out last year, man. And it's not like they're going to spend willy-nilly. And I don't think they did that the year before either. But you get these teams that are just getting these free agents and they're just throwing this money at them. I think the Broncos so measured last year, they had to be. I kind of like that approach this year too, and find those Malcolm Roach guys, find the Brandon Jones guys, whoever's out there. I feel they'll be measured and aggressive if they have to be.
Well, last year it was about stopping the run, upgrading the run defense, and moves were sort of targeted in that direction. Malcolm Roach was clearly an attempt to upgrade the run defense. Brandon Jones, someone who could come forward and be aggressive against the run, an effort to upgrade that. And then Cody Barton was, okay, let's see if we can get somebody in coverage who can keep up with tight ends. The results on Cody Barton, I think, were decidedly mixed, but the results for Brandon Jones, Malcolm Roach, and even giving the contract to PJ Locke and bumping him up to a starter, all of them, I think, came out pretty well in terms of what the Broncos got in terms of bang for the buck. Even Josh Reynolds, it looked like he was going to work out on the offensive side before he got hurt. And then by the time he came back, effectively Devon Vele had taken his place in the offense, and also Marvin Mims Jr. had emerged. So Josh Reynolds was probably going to be a one-year guy anyway. Just when you had other younger players that were getting playing time and you wanted to keep turning the pages on them, you moved on from him as the Broncos did in December. But the Broncos, they were forced to be resourceful and intentional, and I think now you shouldn't lose sight of that going into this offseason. And I'll also go back to something that I learned in the 2023 offseason about the approach that Greg Penner wants to have. He believes in draft and develop. He believes in trying to have a sustained winner. It was made clear to me in the 2023 offseason that sort of splurge that the Broncos had to make was not an every year thing, and it was in fact rooted in lacking draft capital that year because, of course, the Russell Wilson trade and the Sean Payton trade had really sapped the Broncos of a wide array of draft capital that they needed to work around that. But that's not the case. The Broncos, they've got their day one and day two picks. They don't have any compensatory picks, but they've got 7 draft picks going into this. There's no reason for them to have to compensate for what they lack at the top of the draft.
Right. And I just love the way that Greg Penner does business, Mace. We'll get to it probably next week at some time, talking about the injuries, but how Greg himself dug in so much and finding out about that and entrusting the right football people in terms of how do you work free agency, draft and develop. He's a very well-researched man and also someone who listens. He didn't come in and just start telling you this is what you're going to do. He listens, he puts the right people in place, and then he listens to what they need while also studying himself with great business acumen.
And gives the football people on hand a chance, right? George Payton is still here. And George Payton, it happens fast. I mean, George Payton's been on the job through 4 seasons now, and he had a 6-year contract. It might be time to talk about a contract extension for old GP.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be working that way. Yeah.
You know who also, when they bought an NFL team, decided to, by and large, observe, learn from the people around that were already there before really kind of asserting himself? The late Pat Bowlen. He came in 1984 as Broncos owner, inherited Dan Reeves, inherited John Beek. And, I mean, Beek was around all the way through the Mike Shanahan era. Dan Reeves would end up coaching 9 seasons under Dan Reeves, 3 of which ended in Super Bowl appearances. And the reasons why those 2 were around to have the success that they had was because Pat Bowlen didn't come in guns a-blazing. He understood that there were things he didn't know, and he sat back and listened, both in the organization and then in league-wide matters in those first few years, and then he became a leading voice. And I think you'll probably see Greg Penner become a leading voice league-wide on things as well, now that he's settling in and getting comfortable.
Yep, and that's why you see him involved in so many of those committees. Like,
Yeah.
it means a lot to him to be very, kind of dug in with the league and with decision making and understanding everything, and also, just having that steady presence. They were a top tier franchise with Mr. Bowlen. Things fell off a little bit during the transition, and then now with the Walton Penner Group, you and I've been around this team for 2 decades, man. I feel that kind of settled steadiness, steady hand of guidance is back.
Oh, 100%. And think how it can go wrong when the team is sold, right? Carolina got sold back in 2018 and was sold to David Tepper, who had been a minority owner in Pittsburgh for a while. So you figured, okay, this ought to be good. He's got a lot of resources. He's worth $11 billion. He's been around the NFL in some capacity with a quality organization like Pittsburgh. And it's been a dadgum disaster there in Charlotte. And that's why, when you have a new ownership group coming in, it's understandable to be a bit nervous. But here we are. We're 2.5 years in, roughly, to the Walton Penner stewardship. The Broncos appear to be in very steady hands. And I think for this arm of the Walton family, the Walton Penner part of the Walton family empire, as it were, the family business is the Denver Broncos. This is where they're dug in. This is what they do. This is, it's really kind of cool to see how involved with boots on the ground this ownership group is. It's, Broncos hit a home run, and I think you said a couple of years ago, dynasty. I'm not ready to say that because there are so many moving parts to an NFL team that just winning 1 Super Bowl is an achievement.
Yes, very much so.
The thing that good ownership can do is guarantee that you might be down and you might have some rough seasons, but you're not going to stay down for long. I mean, take a look at the New England Patriots, for example. They've had a rough few years. Seems like now they've got Mike Vrabel in. They've got a quarterback they've identified in Drake May. Seems like the Patriots are starting to find their way out, and a big part of that is because you have somebody at the top in Robert Kraft and then his son Jonathan who know what the heck they're doing.
Right. Denver Broncos fans, you got it made with the Walton Penner Group and Greg Penner running the show. You want to start with him talking about the free agent plan or about the cap constraints? Mace, where should we begin?
Let's go chronologically in terms of last year to this year. So I want to start with what he talked about last year in terms of operating under what eventually became a $91 million dead money figure, the second highest in league history. And for Russell Wilson, of course, $53 million, the largest single player dead money figure for 1 year in NFL history. Here's Greg Penner talking about that on Wednesday.
In terms of managing through the salary cap and a big dead cap hit this year, It was challenging, but I think it forced us to be really sharp in our decision making. And again, I think George and Sean last offseason made some really good choices. Again, we're going to have some more space this year. That's terrific. We've got pretty much all of our draft picks, and so I think we're in a good position to have a great offseason.
He uses the word sharp. I use the word intentional, but it's kind of the same thing. Like, you can't sharp as in you have to be precise. You had to be surgical. You couldn't just come in with a chainsaw and clear cut and bring in some people. You had to be very detailed at this, and knowing that, okay, we can't shop in the premium aisle for this one. We can't go to Neiman Marcus. We might have to go to Target, but it doesn't mean we can't find great things at Target. We just have to kind of really investigate to make sure that we're getting something that's going to give us bang for our buck. And like I said earlier, with Malcolm Roach, re-signing PJ Locke, with Brandon Jones coming in, trading for John Franklin Myers there on draft day as well, the approach worked. The Broncos got players who really helped them out.
Yep. And part of that is knowing who you are and knowing what you want, and then identifying that when you're shopping there. Penner talked about the free agency plan. You want to set it up before we play it, or should I just go to Greg?
Let's go right in. Let's hear from Greg Penner talking about the plan for the offseason.
Yeah, we talk, the three of us, frequently about this and what our approach will be. And I mean, you saw us after our first season. We really felt like we had to do some things immediately in free agency to shore up both our offensive line and defensive line. Last year we were more constrained. It was a measured approach, and that served us well. As we go into this off season, it's a different situation again, and we're going to have a little more cap space. Our needs are different. You know, we have a young nucleus and a great quarterback to build around, and we haven't set yet what our approach to free agency will be, but if it's appropriate, we'll be aggressive, but I'm not sure that we'll need to do that.
I love that. If it's appropriate, we'll be aggressive. That's a message.
Yeah. If there's something there they like, but it tells you they're not going to force it. Mm-hmm. And he spoke of the young nucleus. The thing to remember is the Broncos did a lot of their shopping over the last 6 months. Quinn Miners, Pat Surtain, Jonathan Cooper, Garrett Bowles. So you re-sign an all-pro guard, an all-pro CB1, an edge rusher had 10-plus sacks, and a left tackle who's been very sturdy and very dependable for you. So actually, you think about that, that's re-signings at 3 of your core 4 positions, the other, of course, being quarterback. You know, your blindside protector, your CB1, your edge rusher. So they've crossed a lot of the important items off of the list already. I mean, you and I talked about Garrett Bowles throughout the season, and I think we both worried about the Broncos not getting something done with him, because if you didn't and you create a huge need at a core position and you boxed yourself into spending in free agency or going out there in the draft and maybe having to think about tackle in a year that probably isn't all that great for tackles anyway, now you don't have to worry about that. Now you can focus on other areas, knowing that you've got somebody. Okay, I'm not going to say Garrett Bowles is all pro, but I'd say he's a top 10 left tackle at this point in his career. And certainly we've seen from left tackles like Jason Peters and Trent Williams and Andrew Whitworth in recent years that those guys can age really well. And Garrett Bowles is relatively young because he didn't take up football until relatively late in his youth as he got into his 20s. He ought to have another 3 or 4 good years left at left tackle. So, you know, there's something to be said for understanding, okay, we're not going to be the best at every position, but we found someone who's good enough. We don't want to run the risk of having a downgrade there when you're trying to keep Bo Nix upright. And it also goes to Sean Payton investing in the offensive line. And like Greg Penner said, that first offseason, offensive line, defensive line, a little more offensive line than defensive line, because they had Zach Allen on the defensive side, But remember that first off season, it was Mike McGlinchey and Ben Powers. Yep. Ben Powers has been solid. Mike McGlinchey was very good this past year.
Very, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're taking care of the trenches. Now time for some fantasy football draft. Tyler Warren. We're not talking about Ashton Jeanty or Tyler Warren if they have a left tackle hole.
Well, we are, but we're kind of also saying we have to talk about the tackles as well, right? And now you can say, okay, we can get this offseason down to some key spots. And, I think urgent is tight end and running back. Sort of a layer down is wide receiver. I think the fact that Marvin Mims Jr. really stepped forward there in the back half of the season, I think took a little bit of pressure off in terms of what the Broncos need to do at wide receiver. I think that, certainly we'll, do our little thing on A.T. Perry. I think we're going to talk about A.T. Perry next week in the show, because it's important, I think, to view him as part of that young collective. Devon Vele, Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims Jr., A.T. Perry, all guys that were either rookies or second-year players last year. And you're ideally getting two of them to develop and blossom into players who can help you. Then kind of below then I think another need is probably inside linebacker, and that's one I think we probably need to have some conversations about. You'll get Alex Singleton back, but Singleton could also be a cap casualty. That's actually in terms of if they did try to create some cap space, two of the obvious spots in terms of contract are Cortland Sutton and Alex Singleton. Now with Sutton, I think you can do a restructure, add a year to it. He showed he's all the way back and had his best from that 2020 knee injury, has best year since back in 2019, and certainly has good chemistry with Bo Nix. So, and is a great locker room presence as well. So I think the notion of adding a year or two to Cortland Sutton and maybe getting that cap hit for 2025 down a bit is something that you look at as well to create some more space to be more active.
Yeah, the Broncos will be maneuvering there. And by the way, Mace, we'll get into it in draft shows, and maybe we'll see him at the Senior Bowl. I found another Chad Muma. I don't think he's Logan Wilson, but I found another one. And not from Wyoming, by the way. It's Wyoming.
Oh, big news. We're not talking about a Wyoming backer for a change.
But a guy that I wanted Logan Wilson. I wanted Chad Muma. So, okay, maybe, just maybe, we'll put a pin in that conversation. As I swallow wrong, let's talk about your conversation with Greg Penner about the uniforms. And you want to set this up, and we'll play Greg kind of revealing his thoughts on the uniforms.
I'll set this up. First of all, like you kind of coughing there. I didn't put this in the clip because I'm kind of embarrassed of it, but I swallowed some spit right before when I got handed the mic, and I coughed, and oh boy, this is not good. And so it sounded like I was emotional, like I had a frog in my throat, whatever, when I said it. I had a few questions I wanted to ask Greg. It really depended when I, got my turn. If I'd been earlier, I would have asked probably about kind of off-season plans, what you learned from the salary cap constraints, et cetera. I was, toward the end of that one. I went early in Sean Payton. I went late in George Payton and Greg Penner. And so I thought, okay, no one's asked about the uniforms. And I know it's going to get traction. Like people, you're not interested in it to the degree that I am, Cease. And a lot of people are like, who cares? But a lot of people do care about it. And certainly it's something that stirs an emotional reaction in fans. And so I asked Greg Penner what he thought of the fan reaction and what he thought of how the new uniforms looked. Because look, Cease, this is a big part of what the Broncos are under the Walton Penner group, right? It's a very strong visual symbol of their stewardship. They're the Denver Broncos, but the uniforms say they're the Walton Penner Denver Broncos. And so that's part of why I was curious to hear what Greg thought about not only the fan reaction, but some of the things that he liked about the uniforms. And here's Greg talking about that.
Well, the fans perceptions, I think, varied. The one thing I would say about the fans was that there was very strong interest. So I think some loved it, some didn't like it, and I think that's to be expected. But they definitely care. And I think we wore 13 different combinations this year, and including the throwbacks. Everybody, I think, unanimously, everybody loved the throwbacks. I like the navy with the snow cap helmets. I think those are great as well. The core uniform, I thought looked great. There was one combination that I wasn't crazy about, which was the blue socks, orange pants, blue shirt. But maybe we won't do that one again. But I think they showed really well.
He meant that, I put it there in brackets. He meant the orange jersey, blue pants, blue socks, which was in the Chargers game. And I tend to agree that didn't look good. There's something about a uniform, or if you've got a colored shirt and a colored pair of pants, you have to have the darker color up top, right? Like if you have black and silver, black jersey, silver pants. A silver jersey and black pants wouldn't look right. Carolina sometimes wears a blue jersey with black pants. I don't think that looks right. Baltimore purple over black, kind of the same thing. Doesn't really look good. I think blue jersey over orange pants might look better, kind of what he described, but they'd have to use one of their alternate uniform games on that. It was interesting. It said he liked the navy uniform jerseys with the white helmets. Like players like that as well. Like I think that was an unexpected star for the Broncos. And I think if you gave some truth serum to people in Broncos headquarters seats, I think they'd say that they wish the NFL wasn't so restrictive on when you can use helmets and with what jerseys, because I think they'd like to see those white helmets with blue, with orange. The white helmets went over very well. I mean, I've fooled around with it just in Photoshop. I'd love to see the white helmets with orange jerseys and white pants someday. Like, I think that would absolutely pop. But
look pretty clean.
Yeah, it would. As long as they don't wear the same color pants and socks. Like that's the thing I hate. I don't like it when it looks like they're wearing leggings. It's not good. Not because on Sunday in Buffalo they went orange pants, orange socks. Didn't look good. Those socks need to be blue or white, not orange.
Yep.
That's it didn't look professional to me. I know it's in style, but it doesn't look like an NFL team. I actually think if I were the stupid thing I would propose if I were in the owners' meetings this spring is I'd say we need to get a little bit more persnickety on socks here, right? We've kind of gone to this come as you are thing, and I think we got to actually rein this in because the leggings does not look good in my opinion.
Well, you've got opinions, and we've got a show. So there you go.
I've got opinions. I should probably do a solo brain dump on this sometime.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that.
Yeah.
Mace, it's on a Friday. Everyone in Colorado and all in this cold snap all over the place. Just please, stay safe, stay warm, check in on your loved ones, especially if they're elderly, and make sure everybody's heater's working, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. We're gonna have a weekend of football, so I look forward to staying home and not leaving the house.
Get those faucets dripping just a little bit so you don't have burst pipes. So if you're sitting at home, just you don't have to have it flowing, just you want to go drip, 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 and that might save you a lot of agony in the next few days because this cold snap's going to endure. So it's been a while since it's been this cold for this long as it's going to be in Colorado. So just stay warm. And, I've got also want to mention the late Bob Uecker who died on Thursday. That's why I'm wearing a Milwaukee Brewers cap, their City Connect cap. But, very few people have melded sports and comedy the way that Bob Uecker did. I mean, you didn't have to be a baseball fan to appreciate like what he did, like his role in Major League, for example, when he was the announcer, Harry Doyle. By the way, completely ad-libbed his entire part in that film.
I can believe it.
Yep. They just let him roll. So all those lines that we quote here,
just a bit outside
decades. Yes. With the, I can quote so much of that. Let's see. Indians got one run on one hit. That's all we got. One damn hit. You can't say damn on the radio. No one's listening anyway. Or I like the one where he's hosting the talk show. Hey, in case you haven't noticed, and judging by the attendance, you haven't. Oh, gosh. Or like when he's right after Just a Bit Outside and all the pictures are all over the place and Wild Thing loads the base. He's like, how can these guys lay off of pitches so close? It's just, oh, man. Harry Doyle. And then, of course, his underrated color man, Monty. Like, Monty, you got anything to add? No. He's not the best color man in the league for nothing, folks.
Everybody needs to watch that this weekend, too.
Yeah, I think that's going to be something I watch Saturday night. Just kick back and take that in. Hey, if you really want to go full Bob Uecker, find some Mr. Belvedere episodes on YouTube. Although there was a time in the 1990s where if he'd do interviews with media when the Brewers would go to visiting cities and all that, because everyone wanted to talk to Uecker, right? But he had a habit of shutting them down if he was asked about Mr. Belvedere.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Or go watch like some of the clips of like the late Norm Macdonald and Artie Lang talking about hanging out with Bob Uecker and some of the more colorful metaphors he'd use. Like he was a wizard with profanity too, but he didn't let that on the Brewers broadcasts over the years. Mr. Baseball, man, I'm really sad, and sad that he never got to call a Brewers team winning the World Series. Like that's. Because for all he did, as famous as he became, as much in show business as he did, he kept coming back to Milwaukee every year to be the Brewers play-by-play announcer. Another color guy, their play-by-play guy, and was their voice for 54 years. And I've got it on my Twitter. You can hear his call right after the Brewers lost in the postseason last October. They were up 2-0 heading into the ninth inning, and Pete Alonso hit a 3-run homer for the Mets, and the Mets advanced and the Brewers went home. And you can hear it in his voice. Like, he's like, that one stings a bit. And now we know that at that point he'd been battling cancer for over a year and a half. And so you listen to that and your heart just breaks because there are these long pauses and it's like he's thinking about all of it. Like and you kind of wonder if he was realizing like, I'm never going to see this team win a World Series. I'm never going to get to call it, and that's really sad. That adds it's just sports, but I mean, yeah, it's tough when you think about it for Brewers fans. And so for Brewers fans everywhere, and then for Bob Uecker, I've got this hat and, go have a cold pop for him. I think he'd appreciate it.
Watch some of his old beer commercials. Must be in the front row, Mace.
Oh my gosh. Those were, gosh.
Mm-hmm. If you know, you know.
Bingo. Like... Every line reading from him is perfect. Like it's just there's actually one where he like John Goodman is in the commercial. Like John Goodman before he's famous, he's just playing a guy at the bar when Euchre's like going in and saying they pretend to be Whitey Ford to get everyone to buy him a beer.
National treasure, man.
National treasure. We're the richer for have him come through, and we're the poorer now without him. Well, it won't be the same.
Well, a hat tip to heaven for Bob Uecker. Thank you very much, Mace, for those stories. Thank you all for watching us here on YouTube. Enjoy your weekend. Stay warm. I definitely will stay frosty. But first, you have to help us out on YouTube. Mace, how can folks do that?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe, hit
that notification bell
so that you
never miss
vid. That's right. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at C Salami saying OBT's BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned and stay frosty.